It's impossible for me not to be aware of Hughes as a presence of, as somebody who I've followed in lots of different ways. I mean, even if I go right back to the beginning and I think about when I started writing and why I started writing, his poems woke me up to poetry. They set the standard of poetry. But there was a local connection. He was the man from the next valley. And I think there was always a sense in my mind that if he could do it, coming from there, growing up in a very similar house to my house, why couldn't I do it? We don't share the same concerns or styles or subjects, but nevertheless, he made all this possible for me. It's always just been a privilege to spend time with his work, and writing new poems about him and his work is just an extension of that privilege. So I was commissioned to write 2 new poems vaguely on the subject of Ted Hughes and his experience, upbringing, background in South Yorkshire. It's the lesser known part of Hughes's backstory, but is becoming more well known, and there are sort of strong links now established between this part of the world and some of his best known poems. It's not an easy commission, trailing along in Ted's footprints. I knew that I didn't want to write about him. There's been plenty said about Ted in the past, but I spent some time here looking around this building where he went to school, and thinking really, in the first instance anyway, about Ted living till the age of 7 or 8 in West Yorkshire, in a small town where he'd pretty much be able to walk out of the front door and very quickly be in wooded valleys and up on the hills and the moors. Mexborough, it's not as if it's sort of New York City or anything like that, but by comparison, it is a more industrialised environment and a less rural one. And I just imagined that he would have been hunting for a space here, a location, to replicate those adventures that he'd been having as a boy in West Yorkshire, and seemed to find that on the other side of the river, up in Old Dennerby. And in one of the poems, The Elsewhere, I imagine him looking out of the window of the school here and setting his sights, pinning his hopes on that countryside, across the river, and then the journey that he needed to take to get there, and then the idea that once you've set your soul free in that landscape, it never particularly rejoins you. The other poem, Paperboy, came out of being shown around Mexborough and what is now established as a sort of reconstruction of Ted Hughes's paper round. His parents, when they moved here, took a newsagent shop. And although we're different generations, I was thinking of the paper round as that rite of passage that a lot of boys and girls go through into the world of work and graft. And I think all of us who had a paper round blame our wonky spines on the Friday evening paper with the supplement in there that we could barely lift, and also that initiation into for a morning paper round anyway, the world before it belongs to everybody else. There's something very particular, something that you can almost own in the early morning when it's just you out there in the world. It made me think of Hughes's poem Cockcrows, where he describes this great conflagration of dawn from the top of the hill. And I was thinking about my own paper round out of the village of Marsden, where I grew up, in a morning, and arriving at the top of the hill to meet the sun as the sun was coming up. And I guess in that sense, theoretically, imaginatively following in Hughes's footsteps, just in the sense that, he'd had a paper round and presumably experienced some of those similar feelings and sensations, and got a little look into people's private lives through the letterboxes, whether you wanted it or not.